I'm a nurse, and I've heard countless last words. People confess strange things when they think it's their last breath. Secrets, regrets, names no one else remembers. But there was one patient, whose words still haunt me. Just before surgery, he looked at me, dazed, half-conscious, and said, "Your mother's garden still smells like lilacs in the rain." The problem was, he had never met my mother. He had never even been to my hometown. When I asked him how he knew that, he smiled faintly and whispered, "Because I've been there, Eleanor. I remember the sound of your father's record player, and the night your brother disappeared." That's when I realized. He was remembering things he couldn't possibly know. Things that belonged only to me. The next morning, I looked through his file again. No family listed. No recent history. Just an old, faded paramedic ID. Oregon State Emergency Response Unit. Date, 2008. That year, hit me like a whisper from the past. 2008. The same year my brother, Jacob, disappeared. Coincidence, I told myself. Just coincidence. But later that day, during lunch, I heard it again. His voice, quiet but sharp. "You left the porch light on for him, didn't you?" The tray slipped from my hands. That line. Those exact words. Were what my mother used to say every night for months. After Jacob vanished, I rushed back to his bedside. "Samuel, how do you know that?" His eyes opened, foggy gray. "Because I was there," he said. "I remember the record playing. Sinatra. And you crying in the hallway." My heart stopped. He couldn't know that. No one could. That night, the storm came. Lightning flickered through the windows. And the machines hummed like restless ghosts. Samuel stirred again. And I leaned close to check his vitals. He whispered. He didn't mean to hurt him. My pulse raced. Who, Samuel? Who didn't mean to hurt who? But his voice faded into the static hum of the monitors. Only the rhythm of the heart machine answered me. Steady, haunting, human. Later, in the break room, I found myself staring at an old photo of my brother. 14 years old. Smiling. Gone. And now, 15 years later, a man I'd never met was speaking like he'd been there. By the third night, I couldn't stay away. I waited until the ward went quiet. Then sat beside his bed. "Samuel," I whispered. "Do you remember me?" A pause. Then his lips moved slowly. "You used to sit by the window," he murmured. "Your father played Sinatra every Sunday," he said. "Some memories are worth the pain." My knees almost gave out. That was exactly what my dad used to say. "How do you know that?" I asked. His breathing changed. "Because, it stayed with me." "What do you mean?" He opened his eyes, distant, trembling. When the sirens came, he was already gone. But I touched his hand. He was just a boy. I stepped back. "Who was?" But he didn't answer. His body jerked, monitors screamed. Doctors rushed in. I held his arm as they stabilized him. And as his heartbeat slowed again, he whispered one last line before sedation pulled him under. "You were wearing a yellow raincoat. And you screamed his name into the woods." That memory. The yellow raincoat. The forest. My voice breaking. I hadn't thought about it in years. How could he know that? Was it delusion? Coincidence? Or something deeper? Something no medical record could ever explain? On my next day off, I searched the old archives. And there it was. One forgotten record. Samuel Hayes, Oregon State EMT, 2008. Incident, missing child recovery attempt. Unsuccessful. Location, Denton County Woods. Date, September 19, 2008. My breath caught in my throat. That was the night Jacob disappeared. Samuel wasn't just anyone. He had been the paramedic who responded that night. He'd been there that evening. When I went back to check on him, his eyes opened again, clearer this time. He looked straight at me and said softly, "Eleanor, I've seen you before." My voice shook. "Where?" He didn't blink. "In the dark. By the tree line. You were holding a flashlight." Tears filled my eyes. "That's impossible. That was 15 years ago." He smiled faintly. "Time doesn't always stay where it should." Before I could answer, his vitals spiked. Machine screaming. I called for help. Doctors ran in. They worked fast. But even as they fought for him, Samuel turned his head toward me and whispered his final words. "He's still waiting for you." Then, the monitor flatlined. Sometimes the past doesn't rest. Sometimes it finds a way back. Through someone else. And as I stood there, the storm raging outside, one thought echoed in my mind. Who was waiting for me, and why? When the monitor flatlined, the world seemed to stop. The sound wasn't just mechanical, it felt human, final, cruel. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Samuel Hayes was gone. The doctors tried for 7 minutes to bring him back. I stood frozen at the foot of the bed, watching the green lines refuse to return. 7 minutes of silence and panic. 7 minutes where I could almost feel something leaving the room. Then suddenly, his body jerked. The monitor screamed back to life. A weak pulse, shallow breaths. But he was alive. When his eyes opened, they didn't look the same. Something behind them had shifted, like someone else was looking out. He turned toward me slowly and said, "You shouldn't have gone looking." I felt my blood run cold. "Samuel," I whispered, "do you remember what you said to me?" He blinked twice. "Not everything belongs to you, Eleanor." I tried to speak, but no words came. He closed his eyes again, whispering, "They never stopped searching for him." "Not really." Then he fell silent. That night, I couldn't go home. Every word echoed through my mind. They never stopped searching for him. Was he talking about my brother? Or about himself? I found myself sitting in the hospital cafeteria long after midnight, staring at the rain on the windows. Outside, the lightning flickered like an old film reel. In the reflection, for half a second, I thought I saw a boy's face behind mine, Jacob's face. But when I turned, there was nothing there. The next morning, I checked on Samuel. His vitals were stable. His brain scans showed activity spikes that didn't make sense. The neurologist said it was likely residual trauma. But when I looked at the imaging pattern, the lines seemed to form something. A rhythm. A pulse. It almost looked like Morse code. Later that day, while cleaning his chart, I noticed a faint pencil mark on the back page. A smudged note that hadn't been there before. Just 2 words, tree line. I stared at it for a long time. That was where Jacob's flashlight had been found. Half buried in the dirt, 15 years ago. That was where they stopped the search. By evening, Samuel was awake again. He looked calmer, more focused. But when I entered, he said something that made my knees go weak. "You were right to leave the porch light on." I couldn't hide the tears. "Samuel, how do you know these things?" He stared at the ceiling. "Because someone showed me." "Who?" I asked. He smiled faintly. "The boy in yellow." That name hit like thunder. "The boy in yellow," I whispered. "You mean my brother?" He didn't answer, but his eyes glistened with something that looked like guilt. I stayed with him through the night. He kept murmuring between dreams. Fragments of sentences. "You called for him. The sirens were too late. Don't look under the roots." I wrote everything down. I didn't know why, but it felt like he was giving me directions. Like his memories were trying to lead me somewhere. The next morning, I found an old report from that night in the hospital archives. It confirmed Samuel's presence at the scene. But there was also a second responder listed. Dr. Richard Lang, chief resident at the time. Lang had been my father's colleague. And he was still working at the same hospital. I confronted him during lunch. He was older now, gray-haired, calm. When I asked about Samuel Hayes and that night, his expression changed instantly. He said, "That case is closed, Eleanor. Don't dig into it." But there was fear in his eyes. That fear told me everything. Something had happened that night. Something they buried. When I returned to Samuel's room, he was staring out the window. "You spoke to him," he said quietly. I froze. "How do you know that?" He smiled faintly. "He doesn't like when people remember." "Who doesn't?" I asked. He looked at me with a strange calm. "The man with the broken promise." I didn't understand. But when I turned to check his chart, I noticed his hand moving. He was writing something on the bedsheet with his finger, over and over again. 3 letters. J. L. R. I whispered them aloud. "JLR?" He nodded slowly. "Ask your father." My father had passed away 5 years ago. There was no one left to ask. But something about those letters burned in my mind. JLR. Jacob. Lang. Responder. Could it be initials? A code? That night, I drove to my parents' old house. The garden was overgrown, the porch light long burned out. Inside, the record player still sat in the corner, dusty but waiting. I played one of my father's old Sinatra records, the same song Samuel had mentioned. The one that said, "Some memories are worth the pain." As it played, I found myself drawn to my father's study. There were still boxes of files, old hospital records, patient notes. Most were from around 2008. I went through them one by one, until I found a folder labeled Incident 314, Denton Woods. Inside was a printed report, an early draft of the case. Half of it was redacted, but one line was clear. Responder S. Hayes witnessed cardiac arrest of juvenile male, identity presumed as missing subject Jacob L. Roberts. Declared non-viable at 0:42 hours. My hand shook. Jacob wasn't missing. He had been found. But someone erased it. The report ended with an addendum in my father's handwriting. Contact Dr. Lang before formal filing. I felt the floor tilt beneath me. My father had known. He had been part of it. The wind outside howled against the windows. I sat there for a long time, staring at the name, Dr. Lang. The same doctor who told me to stop asking questions. The same man who still walked the halls of my hospital. I drove back to the hospital before sunrise. When I reached room 312, Samuel was awake again. He looked pale, fragile, but aware. I handed him the report. "Tell me the truth," I said. "Did you see my brother?" He looked at the paper, then at me. "I didn't just see him," he said softly. "I carried him." I stepped back, my throat closing. "You carried him?" He nodded. He was still breathing when I found him. We tried to revive him. But Lang, he stopped us. I felt sick. "Stopped you?" "Why?" He said it was too late. He said we couldn't risk the lawsuit. Samuel's voice cracked. He told me to say we never found the boy. That's what I did. I lied. Tears blurred my vision. "Why are you remembering it now?" He looked down at his trembling hands. "Because I died once too. And when I came back, something came with me." I stared at him, unable to move. "Something?" He nodded slowly. "Memories. Not mine. His." Sometimes I dream in his voice. Sometimes I see what he saw that night. The tree line. The light. The man in the white coat. I whispered, Lang. He didn't answer. He just said, the truth is buried where they left him. Before I could respond, alarms blared again. Samuel clutched his chest, gasping. Doctors rushed in, shouting orders. I was forced out of the room as they worked on him again. Through the glass, I saw him sit up for a split second. His eyes rolled white, and he shouted one last thing. Under the roots. Then he collapsed. The alarms faded. The room fell silent again. But this time, when they pulled the sheet over his face, I knew the silence wasn't final. Because I finally understood what he was trying to tell me. The truth wasn't gone. It was waiting. Under the roots. I didn't sleep that night. Not after what Samuel said. Under the roots. Those words echoed through every heartbeat. Every passing car outside my window. Every second that refused to fade into silence. Under the roots. What did he mean? Was it literal? Or another broken fragment from a dying mind? By morning, I knew I couldn't ignore it anymore. If Samuel's memories were real, if they were truly his and mine combined, then the only place to find answers was where it all began. The woods. The same place where Jacob vanished 15 years ago. The same place Samuel said he'd carried him from. The drive to Denton Woods felt longer than it should have. The sky was colorless, flat, like it didn't want to remember either. I parked where the search team had once set up their base. Nothing left now but overgrown weeds and a rusted "No Trespassing" sign. For a moment, I almost turned back. But then I heard it. The faint hum of a record player, Sinatra. Carried through the trees like a whisper from somewhere that shouldn't exist. My heart raced. It couldn't be. I followed the sound. Pushing through branches heavy with rain. Every step felt like walking deeper into memory. Then I saw it. The old clearing. The same place where they found Jacob's flashlight years ago. The same tree line from my dreams. The sound stopped. The air turned still. And then, beneath one of the oldest trees, I saw it. The ground, uneven, disturbed. Like something had been dug there. And covered again. I dropped to my knees. The soil was damp, soft. When I brushed away the leaves, my hand hit something solid. Wood. My heart thudded painfully. I dug faster, hands shaking. Until I uncovered the corner of a small wooden box. It wasn't large, maybe a foot across, sealed shut with rusted nails. I hesitated, breathing hard. Was this what Samuel meant? Was this what had been waiting? Inside, I found a folded photograph. 2 people. My father and Dr. Lang. Standing beside an ambulance. Smiling. And behind them, a boy, wrapped in a blanket. Jacob. I could barely hold the photo. He was alive in that picture. Alive. And written on the back, in my father's handwriting, was a single line. Lang said we did the right thing. The world tilted. I dropped the photo, my hands trembling. If Jacob had survived the accident, why did they lie? And what happened after that picture was taken? Suddenly, a noise behind me. Branches snapping. Footsteps. I turned. A figure stood at the edge of the clearing. Umbrella in hand, face shadowed by the rain. Dr. Lang. He looked older, weaker. But his eyes were sharp. You shouldn't be here, Eleanor. I stood, clutching the photo. What is this? He didn't answer. He just sighed. Samuel told you too much. He remembered, I said, my voice shaking. He remembered everything. Lang stepped closer, lowering his umbrella. Memories can be dangerous. Especially the ones that don't belong to us. I backed away. You left my brother out here. No, he said calmly. Your brother was taken to the hospital. He was alive when we brought him in. But your father, he made the decision. My knees weakened. What decision? To stop trying. The words hit like a knife. What are you talking about? Lang's eyes softened, almost pitying. Jacob's condition was irreversible. Your father couldn't let him live like that. So he signed the order himself. I shook my head violently. No. My father would never. He would, Lang interrupted. And he did. But he couldn't face you. So he buried the truth here. My hands went cold. The box. The photo. The handwriting. You helped him, I whispered. Lang nodded slowly. He thought it was mercy. My breath came out in broken gasps. All those years of wondering, of hoping Jacob might come home. And all along, my father had known. Lang took another step forward. I suggest you forget this, Eleanor. The truth will only hurt you. It always does. But I couldn't move. All I could see was Samuel's face in that hospital bed. The guilt in his eyes. The way he said, he didn't mean to hurt him. I looked back down at the box. And noticed something else inside. A small plastic tag. The kind used for patient IDs. Faded, cracked. But the name still visible. Jacob L. Roberts, room 407. I looked up sharply. That room doesn't exist anymore, I said. Lang didn't respond. My pulse quickened. Where is room 407, doctor? He hesitated, then said quietly. Sublevel C, closed after the fire in 2009. He turned and began to walk away. Let the dead rest, Eleanor. You'll only bring them back angry. I stood there in the rain, shaking. Watching him disappear into the mist. Room 407. Sublevel C. That was the next step. That's where the truth waited. I went back to the hospital before dawn. Using my old keycard to access the lower floors. Most of sublevel C had been shut down years ago. The fire had gutted half the wing. But the air still smelled faintly of smoke and something older. Something that shouldn't still be there. The lights flickered as I walked. Dust hung in the air like old breath. At the end of the hall, behind a set of warped double doors. I found it. Room 407. The numbers barely visible under the grime. I pushed the door open. The hinges screamed in protest. Inside was darkness. And something else. A soft hum, faint, mechanical. When I turned on my phone's flashlight, I saw an old hospital bed in the center of the room. Wires. Machines. All long dead. Except one. A heart monitor, still connected to the wall. Still blinking. A single, faint pulse. I stepped closer, shaking. That's when I saw it. A nameplate on the bed's edge. Patient, unknown, transfer unit. Below it, a date. September 19, 2008. The same night Jacob disappeared. I stared at the pulse on the monitor. It wasn't possible. No power should still be reaching this room. Then, from somewhere behind me, a voice whispered, soft, almost childlike. Ellie? I froze. No sound. Just the faint hum of the machine. Then again. Ellie, it's dark. My flashlight flickered. The sound was coming from the corner. A shadowed figure, small, still. I took one step forward. The air grew colder, sharper. Jacob? I whispered. The figure turned its head. Two pale eyes glinted in the light. He looked older than I remembered. But his face. It was him. Jacob, I choked, tears flooding my vision. He tilted his head slightly. A faint smile on his lips. Why did you leave me? He asked softly. And before I could answer, the light went out. Darkness. Cold. The smell of burnt wires and dust. My phone light was gone. But I could still hear that faint, steady heartbeat echoing through the room. And his voice, Jacob's voice, still whispering my name. Ellie, it's dark. My whole body shook. It couldn't be real. He was gone. I saw his coffin. I buried him. But the sound, it wasn't imagined. It came from somewhere behind the bed. I took one slow step forward. Hands trembling. And reached for the emergency light switch near the door. It flickered on, weak red light bleeding into the room. And there he was. Not a ghost. Not a hallucination. But a boy, maybe 19 now, curled in a hospital bed. Tubes running from his arms into dead machines. Eyes half open, breathing slow and shallow. My heart stopped. It was Jacob. Somehow, impossibly. He had been kept alive all these years. Hidden. Forgotten. Jacob, I whispered, falling to my knees beside him. His eyes fluttered. A faint recognition sparking for half a second. Ellie, he breathed. I took his hand, it was cold, paper thin. Tears blurred everything. It's me. I'm here. I found you. He blinked slowly. His lips trembling as if he wanted to say more. But then, his voice changed. Lower. Heavier. Older. You shouldn't have come here. My breath caught. That wasn't Jacob's voice anymore. It was Samuel's. I stumbled backward. The heart monitor began to spike. Beep, 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 faster, louder. As if two minds were fighting inside one body. I watched in frozen horror as Jacob's expression twisted. His voice slipping between tones, his, Samuel's, others. Fragments. Memories. Lives overlapping like static. Too many voices, he gasped. Too many. The monitor screamed. I lunged forward, grabbing his shoulders. Jacob, listen to me. You're safe now. It's me, Ellie. He opened his eyes wide, panic, recognition, pain. And said one sentence that shattered everything I thought I knew. He made me forget, Ellie. My hands went cold. Who? He looked over my shoulder. And I heard it. The creak of the door. Dr. Lang stood in the doorway. His face calm, too calm. You shouldn't be here, he repeated softly. His voice was smooth, almost tender. Eleanor, I told you, the truth would hurt you. You kept him alive, I said, shaking. You hid him down here. Lang sighed, stepping into the red light. I didn't hide him. I saved him. Your father couldn't handle the guilt, so I took responsibility. I used him to study the transfer phenomenon, how memory moves between the living and the nearly dead. I felt sick. You used my brother like an experiment? Lang's eyes didn't waver. He was the key. And Samuel, he was the bridge. When Samuel flatlined years ago, his mind connected with Jacob's residual memory network. That's why he remembered you. That's why he felt your past. He smiled faintly. You called it impossible. I call it progress. My mind spun. All the things Samuel said. The whispers, the memories that weren't his. It all made sense now. But at a cost that made my stomach twist. Lang stepped closer. I can still fix this, Eleanor. If you leave now, you'll never remember any of this. That's how the mind protects itself. I looked down at Jacob, still trembling. Still alive but fading. The monitor was beeping erratically. I'm not leaving him, I said. Lang sighed, then reached into his coat. A syringe glinted under the emergency light. Then you'll remember too much. I stumbled backward, searching for anything. A scalpel, a tool. But all I found was a cracked metal tray. He advanced slowly. His expression terrifyingly calm. This isn't about cruelty, Eleanor. It's about science. We're all vessels of memory. Some are just more useful. The monitor shrieked. Jacob began convulsing, his hand jerking toward mine. Ellie, run. Lang lunged. I swung the tray with all my strength. It hit his arm. The syringe fell, its contents spilling across the floor. Lang stumbled back, clutching his wrist, eyes burning with fury. You have no idea what you've done. Neither do you, I said. And I pulled the main breaker beside the bed. Sparks exploded. The machine screamed. Lang shouted something I couldn't hear. And then everything went black. When I opened my eyes again, the room was silent. Smoke curled from the machines. Lang was gone. And Jacob? Jacob was still. No pulse. No breath. Just peace. I fell to my knees beside him, tears burning down my face. I'm sorry, I whispered. I found you too late. But then, as the emergency lights flickered one last time, I saw something on the monitor. A line of text, barely legible through the static. Memory transfer complete. I froze. What? The machine powered down. And in the silence that followed, I heard one soft breath behind me. Ellie? I turned. Samuel stood in the doorway. Alive, awake. His eyes no longer clouded. He smiled faintly. I remember now. And in that instant, I knew. Jacob's memories had found a new home. He wasn't gone. He was carried. Samuel walked toward me, voice trembling. He's safe now. You can let go. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. All I could do was cry. Because somehow, through all that pain, all that horror, the truth had found a way to survive. In the weeks that followed, Dr. Lang disappeared. No trace. The sublevel was sealed again. No records. No reports. Samuel was transferred to another hospital. And when I visited him one last time, he smiled at me like a brother would. He didn't remember everything, but enough. When I asked if he still heard the voices, he said something that still gives me chills. They're quiet now. But sometimes, when I dream, I see a garden. And a dog that won't stop following me home. That's when I knew. Jacob was still there. Somewhere. Not gone. Just remembered. If this story made your heart race or your thoughts linger long after the screen fades to black, hit subscribe and stay with me for the next secret waiting in the silent caretaker. Because sometimes, what we forget isn't lost. It's just waiting for someone brave enough to remember.